Dr. Maya Richardson walked out of the medical supply building on a warm afternoon, carrying insulin for one of her patients. She'd spent 8 years building her pharmacy, earning trust in her community through calm professionalism and genuine care. But when the patrol car pulled up and Officer Derek Hampton stepped out with that look in his eyes, the kind that said you don't belong here, everything was about to change. What started as a simple errand was about to become 30 minutes of public humiliation in front of dozens of witnesses. Because Hampton saw an easy target, someone who would accept the degradation quietly like all the others before her. But there was one thing he didn't know about the woman standing beside her silver Honda. And today, his arrogance was going to cost the city millions. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun filtered through the front windows of Harmony Health Pharmacy at exactly 6:30, just as it did every weekday morning. Dr. Maya Richardson unlocked the glass door with the same practiced motion she performed for the past 8 years, her keys catching the early light. Inside, everything was exactly where it should be. The prescription counter gleamed under soft lighting. Medication bottles stood in perfect rows, organized by both alphabetical order and frequency of use. The waiting area chairs were aligned just so, with magazines fanned across the side table at precise angles. Maya moved through her opening routine with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd built something from nothing and refused to let it slip. She started the computer system, checked the temperature logs for the medication refrigerator, and reviewed the day's scheduled prescription pickups. At 32, she'd already accomplished what many pharmacists twice her age still dreamed about: independence, respect, and a thriving practice in a neighborhood that desperately needed reliable health care. The walls told stories she rarely shared aloud. Between the required licenses and permits hung certificates most visitors never noticed: advanced clinical pharmacology, pediatric medication specialist, geriatric care consultant, community health advocate. In her desk drawer, sealed in protective sleeves, were awards she'd never displayed. Community service recognitions, letters from families thanking her for catching dangerous drug interactions their doctors had missed. A framed photo of her father on opening day, pride radiating from his weathered face as he helped her hang the sign outside. Her first customer arrived at 7:15 sharp. Mrs. Patricia Lawson, 78 years old, arthritis in both hands, living alone since her husband passed 3 years ago. Maya had her blood pressure medication ready before the elderly woman even reached the counter. "Right on time, Mrs. Lawson," Maya said warmly, her smile genuine and unhurried. "You're a blessing, sweetheart," Mrs. Lawson replied, fumbling with her purse. "My daughter keeps saying I should use one of those big chain pharmacies with the drive-through, but I told her no. I told her you actually know my name. You know what medicines I take. You care." Maya helped her count out the payment, their hands touching briefly. These moments mattered. They were why she'd chosen this neighborhood, why she opened an hour earlier than she needed to, why she stayed late reviewing medication histories to catch potential problems before they became emergencies. The morning flowed with its usual rhythm. Young mothers brought feverish children for over-the-counter consultations. Construction workers picked up prescriptions during their breaks, grateful she never made them feel rushed. A teenager came in nervously asking about acne treatments, and Maya spoke to him with the same professional respect she gave everyone, watching his shoulders relax as she explained his options without judgment. By noon, Maya had filled 43 prescriptions, counseled a diabetic patient on proper insulin storage, and called the doctor's office to question a potentially dangerous dosage for a patient with kidney problems. The doctor had been annoyed at first, then grateful when Maya explained her concern. Another crisis quietly prevented. Another life protected by her attention to detail. Around 1:30, she realized she was running low on insulin supplies. Her regular shipment wasn't due until Friday, but Mr. Collins needed his refill today, and his insurance wouldn't cover an early fill at another pharmacy. She checked her watch, calculated the time, and decided to make a quick run to Meridian Medical Distributors on Oakwood Avenue. 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, and she'd be covered. She left her assistant, Jenny Walsh, in charge of the front counter and grabbed her keys. The afternoon was warm and bright, the kind of spring day that made the city feel alive. Oakwood Avenue bustled with the lunch-hour energy of a neighborhood in the middle of its workday. People sat at outdoor cafe tables, laughing over sandwiches. Delivery vans double-parked, while drivers jogged packages to various storefronts. A street musician played guitar on the corner, his case open for tips. Maya parked her silver Honda Accord in front of the medical supply building and went inside. The transaction took less than 15 minutes. She walked back out carrying a small box of supplies, mentally reviewing the rest of her afternoon schedule. Mr. Collins at 3. The Jenkins family at 3:30. She needed to call the insurance company about Mrs. Patterson's rejected claim. She was reaching for her car door when she heard it. The sharp electronic chirp of a police siren. Brief. Attention-grabbing. She turned, confused, looking for an emergency. But the patrol car had pulled to a stop directly across the street, and the officer inside was looking straight at her. Officer Derek Hampton stepped out of his vehicle slowly, deliberately. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from both gym time and an understanding of how physical presence could control a situation. His uniform was crisp, his badge catching the sunlight. He stood beside his car for a moment, hand resting casually on his belt near his radio, his eyes never leaving Maya. She felt the first prickle of unease, that ancestral warning system that lived in the body of every black person in America. She'd done nothing wrong. She was standing beside her own car in broad daylight on a public street. But none of that mattered when that look appeared in an officer's eyes. That look that said you don't belong here. He crossed the street with measured steps. A woman at the cafe turned to watch. A delivery driver paused, box in hand. "Afternoon," Officer Hampton said, his voice carrying that particular tone of false casualness. "What are you doing in this area?" Maya blinked. "I'm sorry. I asked what you're doing here." He stopped about 6 feet away, his posture open, but his hand still near his belt. "This your vehicle?" "Yes, it is. I was picking up medical supplies." She kept her voice even, professional. The same voice she used to calm anxious patients. "Medical supplies." He repeated the words as if testing them for deception. "You work around here?" "I own Harmony Health Pharmacy on Cedar Street. I needed to restock some items for a patient." "Uh-huh." He stepped closer. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Maya's heart began to beat faster, but she controlled her breathing. "May I ask why?" "Ma'am, I'm not asking twice." The shift from casual to commanding happened in an instant. Around them, more people began to notice. A man in a business suit slowed his walk. 2 teenagers across the street stopped talking. Maya carefully set down the box of supplies on the hood of her car and reached for her purse. She moved slowly, deliberately, making every motion visible. Her driver's license was in her wallet, right where it always was. She handed it to him. Officer Hampton examined it with exaggerated thoroughness, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgeries. "Maya Richardson. This really you?" "Yes, officer. Says here you live on Ashford Road." "That's across town. Long way from Cedar Street." "It's a 15-minute drive." He didn't acknowledge that. Instead, he looked from the license to her face, then back to the license. "You say you work at a pharmacy?" "I own a pharmacy. I'm a licensed pharmacist." "Uh-huh. You got any proof of that?" "Business license? Professional certification?" Maya felt the heat rising in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She reached into her purse again and withdrew her wallet's card holder, extracting her pharmacy license. She handed it to him. He barely glanced at it. "Could be fake." "Excuse me. I said it could be fake. People print all kinds of things these days." He handed both cards back to her. "I need you to place your hands on the vehicle." The words hit her like a physical blow. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Ma'am, place your hands on the vehicle. Now." A woman at the cafe pulled out her phone. Maya saw it happen in her peripheral vision, saw the camera point in their direction. More people were stopping now, a small crowd beginning to form. The musician had stopped playing. "Officer, I'm a healthcare professional. I've committed no crime. I've shown you identification. There's no reason." "Hands on the vehicle." His voice rose sharply. Several people flinched. Maya placed her palms flat on the hood of her car. The metal was warm from the sun. She felt exposed, diminished, reduced to a suspect in front of dozens of strangers. Her mind raced through protocols, through rights, through the careful calculations every black person learned. Comply. Stay calm. Don't give them a reason. Survive the interaction. Why is she being detained? Someone called out. A delivery driver, middle-aged, white, wearing a uniform similar to the officer's in its working-class utility. Officer Hampton's head snapped toward the voice. Sir, step back. This is official business. She didn't do nothing, the driver insisted. I've been standing right here. She just came out of Meridian. I said step back. The driver didn't move, but he didn't speak again either. Maya felt grateful and terrified at once. Witnesses could help. Witnesses could also escalate. Empty your bag. Officer Hampton ordered. Everything on the hood. Right now. This is unreasonable search. Do it. I'll do it for you. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse. She appended it slowly, letting the contents spill across the hood. Her wallet, a pack of tissues, 2 pens, a small notebook where she tracked medication questions to research later, a bag of almonds, her phone, a stack of prescription pads held together with a rubber band, 3 rescue inhalers she'd been planning to donate to a free clinic, her house keys, a tube of lip balm, a photo of her father. Officer Hampton spread the items out with his hands, examining each one. He picked up the prescription pads, flipped through them. These legitimate, yes, they're standard prescription forms. My name and DEA number are printed on them. He set them down and picked up the inhalers. What are these for? They're albuterol inhalers. For asthma. I donate them to. You selling medication without a license? No, I am licensed. I donate occasionally to a community clinic that serves uninsured patients. Uh-huh. He set the inhalers down and picked up her lunch container. Opened it. Looked inside at the remains of her sandwich. Set it down. He was performing for the crowd now, demonstrating his authority, his right to invade every corner of her privacy. A young woman in the cafe was recording on her phone. Maya could see her clearly now, could see several phones pointed in their direction. Ma'am Richardson, Officer Hampton said, deliberately mispronouncing her last name as Richardson. You have any warrants I should know about? No. Any prior arrests? No. You sure about that? I'm certain. He pulled his radio from his belt. Dispatch. I need you to run a name for me. Maya Richardson, Editares. He read off her birth date and driver's license number. Then he waited, keeping her standing there with her hands on the car, her belongings scattered like evidence of wrongdoing. People whispered. Maya felt each stare like a weight. She focused on breathing, on not showing the rage building inside her, on not giving him what he wanted. Dispatch responded after what felt like hours, but was probably 2 minutes. No wants or warrants. Officer Hampton frowned slightly. He ran her name again. Same result. He checked her license plate. Registration current. Insurance valid. Nothing. There was nothing wrong, nothing out of place, nothing to justify any of this. But he didn't let her go. Instead, he leaned against his patrol car and watched her. Let her stand there. Let the crowd watch. Let the phones record. He was teaching a lesson, establishing an order, reminding her and everyone watching who had the power. Maya felt something shift inside her. A memory, sharp and painful, pushing through years of careful control. She was 12 years old, watching her father being handcuffed on their front lawn, watching neighbors stare, watching officers search their house based on a tip that proved false, watching her father's dignity stripped away. She'd made herself a promise that day, standing small and helpless in her school uniform. She'd promised herself she would never be powerless again. She would understand the system. She would build a life so unimpeachable that no one could question her place in the world. And here she stood, that promise broken by a man with a badge and a need to prove something. You have papers? Officer Hampton asked suddenly. Maya's head turned sharply. Papers? Citizenship? Immigration status? The question was so outrageous, so transparently racist, that several people in the crowd gasped. Maya felt rage flood through her, hot and pure and dangerous. "I'm a United States citizen," she said quietly, each word carrying the weight of centuries. "I'm a licensed medical professional. I have provided you with identification. I have answered your questions. I have complied with your instructions. You have no legal reason to detain me." Her voice never rose, never shook, never wavered. That calmness, that refusal to break, seemed to disturb him more than shouting would have. Officer Hampton pushed off from his car and approached her. He leaned close enough that only she could hear his next words. "Don't make this difficult," he said softly. "You understand me?" Maya met his eyes, said nothing, but in that moment, they both knew something had shifted. He'd expected fear, expected submission, expected her to shrink, but she stood straight, her dignity intact despite everything he'd done to strip it away. He stepped back. "You can gather your things. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what he'd just put her through." He returned to his patrol car, got inside, and sat there, watching, waiting for her to leave first. Maya slowly collected her belongings, her hands steadier now than they'd been during the entire encounter. People approached, offering help, expressing outrage. The woman with the phone promised she'd uploaded the video. The delivery driver gave her his number in case she needed a witness. "Thank you," Maya said to each of them. But inside, she felt hollow, humiliated, violated. She placed a box of medical supplies in her car, got behind the wheel, and drove away. In her rearview mirror, she saw Officer Hampton pull out behind her, follow her for 3 blocks, then turn away. The afternoon had been warm and bright and full of life. By the time Maya returned to her pharmacy, it felt like a different world entirely. Jenny looked up from the counter as Maya entered, started to smile, then stopped. "Dr. Richardson, are you okay?" Maya realized she'd been standing frozen just inside the door, staring at her own pharmacy as if seeing it for the first time. "I'm fine. Did Mr. Collins call?" "No, but I need to prepare his insulin." "Excuse me." She walked in the back room, closed the door, and stood alone among the shelves of medications. Her hands shook now that no one could see them. She gripped the counter, forcing herself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like she taught anxious patients. But the shaking didn't stop. For the first time in 8 years, Maya Richardson miscounted pills. She caught herself, stared at the bottle in confusion, then recounted. When Mr. Collins arrived at 3, she handed him his insulin with a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. A 6-year-old girl came in with her mother around 4:30. The child looked up at Maya with wide eyes and asked, "Why do you look sad?" Maya's professional mask cracked for just a moment. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. You look like my mommy when she's sad but pretending." The mother apologized, embarrassed, but Maya shook her head. "She's very perceptive." She forced the smile wider. "I'm just fine." But she wasn't fine. She moved through the rest of the afternoon on autopilot, filling prescriptions with mechanical precision, her mind replaying every moment of the stop, every word, every stare, every second of humiliation. That night, after closing the pharmacy, Maya sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could bring herself to drive home. When she finally walked into her apartment, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat in darkness, still wearing her white pharmacist coat, and tried to feel like herself again. Her phone buzzed around 9 o'clock. A text from her cousin. "Did you see this?" A link followed. Maya clicked it, and her stomach dropped. The video was already online, posted to multiple platforms, shared hundreds of times. But it wasn't the full encounter. The recording started midway through, after Officer Hampton had already demanded she empty her bag. The context was gone, the escalation invisible. What remained looked like a routine stop with a difficult woman refusing simple cooperation. The comment section made her feel sick. Some people defended her. Many didn't. Arguments raged in the replies, vicious and immediate. People who didn't know her, didn't know what had happened, didn't know anything beyond 30 seconds of edited footage, declaring absolute judgments about her character, her actions, her right to be treated with dignity. Maya set down her phone, turned it face down on her coffee table, sat in the darkness, and felt the world shrink around her. The next morning, She opened the pharmacy at 6:30, as always. She went through her routine. She smiled at Mrs. Lawson. She counseled patients. She checked medication interactions. But something had changed, and her regular customers could sense it. Around 10 o'clock, two police officers walked in. Not Officer Hampton. Two others, younger, with carefully neutral expressions. They approached the counter while Maya was filling a prescription. "Dr. Richardson," one of them said, "we need to conduct a routine business inspection." Maya's heart sank. "An inspection?" "Yes, ma'am. Business license, pharmaceutical permits, controlled substance logs, proper storage verification. Standard procedure." It wasn't standard. Maya had owned this pharmacy for 8 years and had never received an unannounced inspection. Annual reviews were scheduled months in advance. But she understood what was happening. The message being sent. "Of course," she said calmly. "Let me get my paperwork." They spent 2 hours examining every detail. They were polite, professional, cold. They checked expiration dates, measured refrigerator temperatures, reviewed her controlled substance inventory with meticulous care. They found nothing wrong because there was nothing wrong. Maya ran her pharmacy by the book. Always had, always would. When they finally left, they handed her a receipt for the inspection. No violations, no warnings, but also no explanation for why they'd come. Jenny watched them go, then turned to Maya. "What was that about?" "I don't know," Maya lied. But she did know. She knew exactly what it was about. Over the next 2 days, Maya began to understand the shape of her new reality. Other black business owners approached her quietly, carefully. The owner of a barbershop 3 blocks away pulled her aside after church. "I saw the video. That Officer, Hampton, he's got a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind where complaints disappear. Where people who push back suddenly get inspected, audited, ticketed for every little thing. Where cameras malfunction at convenient times." A woman who ran a catering business told a similar story. She filed a complaint 2 years ago after a traffic stop that felt wrong. Within a month, the health department had shown up unannounced. Fire marshal, zoning office, building inspector. Nothing major, nothing actionable. Just pressure, just a message. She'd eventually dropped her complaint. "How many others?" Maya asked. "I know of at least 4. There are probably more. People don't talk about it. They just leave or let it go." Maya filed a formal complaint with the police department's civilian oversight board. She worded it carefully, professionally, attaching the partial video that had been posted online and requesting the full body cam footage. She sent it via certified mail and waited for confirmation. Days passed. No confirmation arrived. She called the oversight board. The woman who answered said she had no record of a complaint under Maya's name. Maya explained she'd sent it certified mail. The woman said sometimes things took time to process. She should be patient. Meanwhile, her pharmacy supplier called with unexpected news. Her regular insulin shipment would be delayed. Supply chain issues. Nothing personal. Maya had worked with the supplier for 8 years without a single delayed shipment. Her bank called the next morning. There had been unusual activity on her business account. Nothing specific, just a flag for review. They needed her to come in and verify several transactions. Transactions she'd been making for years without issue. A city business licensing official left a voicemail about scheduling an inspection of her premises. Not the pharmacy this time. A general business compliance review. Would need access to her financial records, employee documentation, lease agreements. Each incident, taken alone, could be explained. Together, they formed a pattern, a net slowly tightening. Maya sat in her pharmacy after closing on Friday evening. The lights dimmed, the street outside quiet. Around her, shelves held medications she'd carefully organized. The counter her father had helped her install. The chairs where patients sat while she counseled them. 8 years of work. 8 years of building something that mattered. Friend are calling now. Family. Her aunt who lived in Atlanta suggested she sell and move. Start fresh somewhere else. Her college roommate wondered if it was worth the fight. Even Jenny had asked gently if maybe she should consider dropping the complaint, just to make things easier. Maya stood and walked to her office. Unlocked the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet. Inside, beneath insurance documents and tax records, sat something she rarely looked at anymore. A stack of old textbooks, constitutional law, civil procedure, legal research and writing, certificates from mediation training she'd completed a lifetime ago. Before pharmacy school, Maya had been preparing for law school. She'd spent 3 years working as a paralegal in a civil rights law firm, learning how the system worked from the inside. She'd seen cases won and lost. She'd seen how power protected itself. She'd watched communities fight back against injustice with nothing but documentation, persistence, and truth. Then her father had been arrested. A false tip. A wrongful detention that lasted 3 days before the mistake was discovered. He'd lost his job. The family had suffered. And Maya had watched the case die quietly, settled for pennies because the city knew they could outlast a working-class family with limited resources. Her father had told her to let it go, to focus on her own future. So she'd switch paths. Pharmacy had seemed safer, more stable, a way to help people without challenging the powerful. She told herself she was being practical, but part of her had simply been afraid. Now, sitting in her office, Maya realized something had changed. The fear was still there, but so was something else. A cold, clear certainty. She understood the system they were using against her. She knew its tools, its tactics, its weaknesses, and she knew something they'd miscalculated. She wasn't powerless. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old contacts. Found a name she hadn't called in almost a decade. Diane Crawford, civil rights attorney. The woman Maya had once interned for before changing career paths. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "This is Diane Crawford." "Miss Crawford? This is Maya Richardson. I don't know if you remember me. I interned in your office back in." "Maya? Of course I remember you. You were one of the sharpest researchers I ever had. You disappeared on me. Went to pharmacy school, didn't you?" "Yes, ma'am. I own a pharmacy now." "Good for you. What can I do for you?" Maya took a breath. "I need to tell you about a police stop and what's been happening since." She talked for 40 minutes. Diane Crawford listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, there was a long silence. "You still have all your law books?" Diane finally asked. "Yes." "Good. You're going to need to remember everything you learned. This isn't just about one bad cop, Maya. What you're describing is systematic. You understand that, right?" "I'm starting to. I'll need documentation. Everything. The video. Your complaint. Every inspection. Every delayed shipment. Every suspicious call." "Can you do that?" "Yes." "One more question. You sure you want to do this? Once we start pulling this thread, there's no putting it back. Your life is going to get harder before it gets better." Maya looked around her office, at the diplomas on the wall, at the photo of her father, at the empty pharmacy beyond the door, dark and quiet and hers. "I'm sure," she said. "Then let's get to work." After the call ended, Maya sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened her computer and began documenting everything. Times, dates, names, details. She worked until well past midnight, building the foundation of what she was starting to understand would become a very different kind of fight. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythms. Cars passed. Lights flickered in windows. Somewhere in that same city, Officer Derek Hampton went about his life, confident that nothing would come of one pharmacist's complaint. He had no idea what he'd started, or who he'd chosen to humiliate. Maya's late-night documentation session with Diane Crawford marked a turning point, but the morning brought a reminder that choosing to fight back came with immediate consequences. Within 48 hours of that phone call, the pressure intensified in ways that felt both calculated and deniable. On Monday morning, a man in an expensive suit walked in a Harmony Health pharmacy, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He introduced himself as Kenneth Wright, Senior Community Liaison for the city's Office of Business Relations. The title sounded official and helpful. The energy he brought felt anything but. "Dr. Richardson, do you have a moment?" he asked pleasantly, glancing around the empty pharmacy. It was early, before the morning rush, and Jenny hadn't arrived yet. "Of course. How can I help you?" Kenneth settled into one of the waiting area chairs, as if he had all the time in the world. "I wanted to reach out personally after hearing about your recent experience." The city takes these matters very seriously, and I'm here to help navigate what can sometimes become complicated situations. Maya remained standing behind the counter, her pharmacist's coat crisp and white, her expression professionally neutral. I filed a formal complaint through the proper channels. I'm waiting for a response. Yes, about that. Kenneth opened his portfolio, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the counter. These processes can take months, sometimes years. They become consuming. Public, media gets involved. Lawyers get involved. Meanwhile, businesses suffer from the distraction. Maya glanced at the paper. It was a summary of her complaint, details she'd submitted to a supposedly confidential oversight board. Seeing it in this man's hands told her everything she needed to know about how the system operated. Your pharmacy is thriving, Kenneth continued. You've built something remarkable here. 8 years of hard work. I'd hate to see that compromised by getting pulled into a lengthy, messy investigation that ultimately might not go anywhere. Are you suggesting I drop my complaint? I'm suggesting we resolve this quietly. The officer in question will receive additional training. You'll receive assurances that future interactions will be professional. And those little issues you've been experiencing lately. He paused meaningfully. The inspections, the supplier delays, the banking complications. Those could be resolved. Smoothed over. We help each other, Dr. Richardson. That's how communities stay strong. Maya felt anger coil in her chest, but her face remained calm. Mr. Wright, I appreciate you taking the time to visit, but I'm not interested in making this go away quietly. What happened to me was wrong. If it's happened to others, that's a pattern that needs to be addressed, not buried. Kenneth's smile faded slightly. He stood, collected his portfolio, and buttoned his suit jacket. I understand. You want to think about it. That's reasonable. But I should mention, these situations have a way of becoming more complicated before they get simpler. Stress affects business, affects health, affects relationships. He paused at the door. My card is on the counter. When you're ready to be practical about this, give me a call. After he left, Maya stood motionless for several minutes. Then she picked up the card he'd left behind, photographed it front and back, and sent it to Diane Crawford with a single text. City sent someone to pressure me into dropping it. Diane's response came within minutes. Perfect. Document everything he said while it's fresh. They're showing their hand early. That afternoon, Officer Derek Hampton returned. Maya was restocking shelves when she felt someone watching. She turned and saw him standing across the street, leaning against a light post, arms crossed. He wasn't doing anything illegal, wasn't blocking traffic or causing a disturbance. Just standing there, watching her pharmacy, watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled. Maya's hands tightened on the medication bottles she was holding. She forced herself to breathe steadily, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. She returned to her work, but she could feel his presence like pressure against her skin. He stayed there for 45 minutes. Customers noticed. One elderly man asked if everything was okay. Maya assured him it was, even as her heart hammered in her chest. When she looked again, Officer Hampton was gone. But the message had been delivered. I know where you work. I can come anytime. You're not safe. That evening, Maya stayed late to reorganize the medication storage room. It was mindless work, but kept her hands busy while her mind raced through everything that was happening. Around 7 o'clock, the bell above the front door chimed. She walked out expecting to see Jenny, who'd forgotten her jacket earlier. Instead, a young man stood nervously near the entrance. He was thin, early 20s, wearing a delivery company uniform with a name tag that read Marcus. He held a prescription bottle in his hand. Are you Dr. Richardson? He asked quietly. I am. Can I help you? Marcus glanced toward the windows, then back at her. I saw the video. The one from last week. With the cop. Maya's stomach tightened. Okay. My sister. He stopped, swallowed hard. She had something similar happen. Different cop, but maybe not. I don't know. She filed a complaint, and it just disappeared. Like literally vanished from the system. When was this? 2 years ago. She was working late, leaving her job at the hospital. Officer pulled her over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. Made her get out of the car. Searched it. Made her wait on the side of the road for an hour while he ran her information over and over. People drove by staring at her like she was a criminal. Maya felt her breath catch. What happened after she filed a complaint? Nothing. They told her they'd investigate. Then weeks went by. When she called, they said there was no record of her complaint. She had the receipt where she filed it, but they said their system showed nothing. Then weird stuff started happening. Her car insurance premium suddenly tripled. She got letters saying her student loans were in default when she'd been paying on time. Her landlord told her someone from the city had called asking about her lease. Did she get a lawyer? Marcus shook his head. She couldn't afford one. Eventually, she just stopped, moved out of state. She told me to never say anything to anybody, but when I saw that video of you, I thought. He trailed off. What's your sister's name? Nicole. Nicole Thompson. She's in Ohio now, working as a nurse. She probably won't talk to anybody, but I can ask her. Maya walked to her office and returned with a business card for Diane Crawford. Have her call this attorney. Tell her I sent you. Tell her she's not alone. Marcus took the card, looked at it, then looked back at Maya. Are you really going to fight this? Yes. They're going to come after you hard. I know. He nodded slowly, respect and worry mixing in his expression. My sister would tell you to run, but I'm glad somebody's finally standing up. After Marcus left, Maya sat alone in her pharmacy and let herself feel the weight of what she'd learned. Nicole Thompson, another woman, another complaint vanished, another life disrupted until she fled. How many others were there? She opened her laptop and began searching. It wasn't easy. Police complaints were supposed to be public record, but finding them required knowing exactly where to look and what to request. She started with the Civilian Oversight Board's annual reports. They were deliberately vague, listing complaint categories without names or details. But patterns emerged. Certain precincts had unusually high complaint rates that never seemed to result in disciplinary action. Certain types of complaints, unsubstantiated, clustered around specific districts. She cross-referenced this with news articles, social media posts, community forum discussions. A woman in the Riverside neighborhood mentioned a traffic stop that felt racially motivated. A man posted about being detained outside his own business. A teenager described being questioned aggressively while walking home from school. None of them named officers. Most of them expressed resignation rather than outrage. This is just how things are. This is the price of existing while black in this city. Maya compiled names, dates, and descriptions into a spreadsheet. Then she sent it to Diane with a note, potential pattern. Need to verify how many involve the same officer or his colleagues. Diane called her 20 minutes later. Maya, this is good work. Really good. But I need to tell you something you probably already know. The deeper you dig into this, the harder they're going to push back. We're not just looking at one officer anymore. We're looking at a system that protects him. That system has resources. It has patience. It will try to outlast you. I understand. Do you? Because I've seen people start cases like this with all the determination in the world, and 6 months later they're broken. Financially, emotionally, professionally. These people know how to apply pressure without ever doing anything obviously illegal. Ms. Crawford, when I was working in your office, do you remember the Mendoza case? There was a pause. The wrongful detention case against the Transit Authority. Yes, we lost. We lost in court. But the Transit Authority changed its policies, retrained its officers. 3 families got settlements. The system pushed back, but we pushed harder. You taught me that sometimes justice isn't winning. It's making them work for their victory, making the cost of corruption higher than the cost of change. Diane was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different tone. You've been thinking about this a long time, haven't you? This isn't just about what happened to you last week. No, Maya admitted. It's about my father. It's about Nicole Thompson. It's about every person who got ground down by this system until they gave up. Somebody has to be stubborn enough not to break. Then let's be stubborn together. I'm officially taking your case. But Maya, I need you to understand something. We're about to go to war with people who think they're untouchable. They will retaliate. They will dig into your life looking for anything they can use. They will try to isolate you from your community. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought about her pharmacy, about Mrs. Lawson and her arthritis medication, about the teenager who'd asked about acne treatment, About 8 years of building trust, one prescription at a time. I'm prepared, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya and Diane began building their case in earnest. They submitted formal requests for Officer Hampton's personnel file, his complaint history, and the body cam footage from Maya's stop. The department responded with delays, requests for clarification, and notices that certain files were restricted under active investigation protocols. Meanwhile, the pressure on Maya's pharmacy continued. Her landlord called to say he'd received an anonymous complaint about commercial zoning violations. The pharmacy's lease was for a medical facility, but someone had filed paperwork suggesting she was operating a general retail business, which required different permits. It was nonsense, easily disproven, but required hiring a lawyer and filing documentation. Her supplier delayed another shipment. When Maya called to complain, the customer service representative was apologetic but unhelpful. There had been a system error that flagged her account for credit review. It would be resolved soon, maybe next week. A health inspector showed up unannounced for the second time in a month. This one was more aggressive than the police officers had been, demanding to see temperature logs, examining medication storage with a magnifying glass, questioning Ginny about her training credentials. He found 3 minor violations: a cleaning log that was 2 days overdue, a medication bottle that was 6 inches closer to the edge of a shelf than safety regulations technically allowed, and a fire extinguisher inspection sticker that was 1 month from expiration instead of 2. He wrote up official warnings for all 3. "This is harassment," Maya told Diane that evening. "Everything he cited is either absurdly minor or deliberately misinterpreted." Of course it is. They're building a file, creating a paper trail that makes you look negligent, so when they move against you more seriously, they can point to a pattern of violations. What do? Document everything. Photograph your pharmacy daily. Keep detailed records. And Maya, we need to go on offense. They're controlling the narrative right now. We need to shift that. 2 days later, Diane filed a formal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Derek Hampton, the police department, and the city. The complaint was detailed and devastating. It described the stop, the humiliation, the systematic retaliation. It cited similar incidents involving other victims. It demanded Hampton's personnel file, his complete complaint history, and all body cam footage from the past 3 years. The filing made local news within hours. "Pharmacist sues city over alleged police harassment," ran the headline. The story spread quickly across social media, local news sites, and community forums. Suddenly, what the city had tried to keep quiet and controllable became very public. Maya's phone started ringing. Reporters requesting interviews. Community activists offering support. Other people sharing their own stories of police harassment. Not everyone was supportive. Anonymous messages arrived calling her ungrateful, divisive, a troublemaker. Someone left a 1-star review on her pharmacy's business page claiming she was unprofessional and had an attitude problem, but others rallied around her. Mrs. Lawson told everyone in her church what a good person Dr. Richardson was. The delivery driver who'd witnessed the original stop contacted Diane, offering to testify. Marcus's sister, Nicole Thompson, called from Ohio and quietly agreed to share her story. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, the deputy mayor's office called Diane. They wanted to discuss possible mediation, private resolution, settlement terms. Everyone could walk away clean. "What do you think?" Maya asked when Diane relayed the offer. "I think they're scared. The lawsuit just got filed and they're already trying to settle. That tells me they know we'll find something if we keep digging. So we keep digging, just checking. Some clients hear settlement, and their resolve weakens. Litigation is expensive, time-consuming, emotionally exhausting. Ms. Crawford, when you told me about the Mendoza case years ago, you said something I've never forgotten. You said the powerful count on us being too tired to fight. They have resources, but we have something they don't. We have the ability to wake up every day and choose this fight again." Diane laughed softly. "I said that. You did. And I'm choosing this fight." That night, around 11 o'clock, Maya was working late at her pharmacy when she heard glass shatter. She ran to the front and found the window beside the door broken. On the floor lay a brick wrapped in paper. Her hand shook as she picked it up and unwrapped the message written in black marker. "Drop it." She called the police. 2 officers arrived 40 minutes later. They took a report, photographed the damage, asked if she had any enemies. She mentioned the lawsuit. They exchanged glances but wrote nothing down. One suggested it was probably random vandalism. The other said she should consider installing better security. After they left, Maya swept up the glass and covered the broken window with cardboard. Then she sat on the floor of her pharmacy, surrounded by shelves of medication and 8 years of hard work, and let herself cry. Not from fear, from rage, from exhaustion, from the sheer weight of fighting a system designed to grind people like her into submission. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have let it go." Maya stared at the message for a long moment. Then she forwarded it to Diane with a single word: evidence. The next morning, she arrived at her pharmacy at 5:30 to meet the glass repair company. While waiting, she noticed someone standing in the shadows across the street. Tall, broad-shouldered. When the streetlight caught his face, she recognized Officer Hampton. He saw her looking, raised his coffee cup in a mock toast, and smiled. Maya pulled out her phone and photographed him. He didn't move, didn't care. The message was clear: "I could be here anytime. You can't stop me." But something shifted in Maya at that moment. She'd spent weeks feeling like prey, constantly reacting to their moves. Now, looking at Hampton's arrogant smile, she realized something crucial. He thought he was in control. He thought the broken window, the intimidation, the systematic pressure would break her. He was wrong. She called Diane. "I need you to request something specific in discovery." Officer Hampton's text message records for the past 6 months. Why? Because someone just texted me from an unknown number telling me I should have let it go. And Hampton is standing across the street from my pharmacy right now at 5:30 in the morning. That's not a coincidence. You think he's stupid enough to text you from his personal phone? I think he's arrogant enough to believe he won't get caught. 2 weeks later, Maya's instinct proved correct. During the discovery process, Diane's team uncovered something remarkable. Officer Hampton had used his personal cell phone to coordinate with other officers about problem citizens in their patrol areas. The messages were coded but clear. Certain neighborhoods, certain business owners, certain people who'd filed complaints or challenged department actions. But that wasn't all. While combing through Hampton's phone records, a forensic analyst found something else. Hampton had contacted a city employee in the risk management department multiple times over the past 3 years, always just before or after incidents that resulted in civilian complaints. Diane brought the findings to Maya's pharmacy after hours. "I need to show you something, and I need you to keep a very open mind." She laid out printed phone records on the counter. Highlighted entries showed calls between Hampton and a city risk analyst named Gerald Foster. This guy, Foster, works in the department that handles liability claims against the city. Every time Hampton had an incident that generated a complaint, he called Foster. And every time, those complaints vanished or got classified as unsubstantiated. "They were coordinating," Maya said slowly. "It's bigger than that. We subpoenaed Foster's work records. He's been involved in settling or burying complaints against multiple officers, not just Hampton. And here's where it gets interesting." Diane pulled out another document. The city is a quiet fund. It's labeled as general risk management, but it's actually used to pay off people who file complaints. Small settlements, NDAs, make-it-go-away money. How much money? In the past 5 years? Over $2 million. Spread across at least 17 settlements. All sealed. All involving allegations of police misconduct. Maya felt her breath catch. That's not one bad cop. That's institutional fraud. Exactly. And Maya, you need to understand what this means. We're not just fighting Officer Hampton anymore. We're fighting a system that's been operating this way for years. They've paid millions to keep people quiet. They've created a pipeline to bury complaints. They've built an entire apparatus to avoid accountability. Who knows about this? That's what we need to find out. But based on the money involved and the coordination required, this goes higher than a risk analyst and a patrol officer. Someone in city leadership approved this fund. Someone signed off on these settlements. Someone made the decision that it was cheaper to pay people off than to actually fix the problem. Maya looked around her pharmacy. At the shelves she'd stocked. At the counter her father had helped install. At the window that had just been repaired. They broke my window to scare me. They've harassed me for weeks. All because I refused to go away quietly. Yes, and now we know why. You're not just threatening one officer's career. You're threatening to expose a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme. What happens now? Now we amend the lawsuit again. We add racketeering charges. We name everyone involved in this fund. We demand full disclosure of every settlement, every complaint, every payment. We burn it all down. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "They're going to come after me even harder." Without question, you're going from being an annoying problem to being an existential threat. They will dig into every corner of your life. They will look for any mistake you've ever made. They will try to destroy your reputation, your business, your peace of mind. Ms. Crawford, do you remember what you told me on my last day as your intern? Refresh my memory. You said the law isn't about justice. It's about power. And the only way to check power is to make the powerful fear the consequences of their actions more than they enjoy their privileges. Diane smiled. I was feeling philosophical that day. You were right. They've been operating without consequences for years. Paying people off, burying complaints, counting on victims being too scared or too poor or too tired to fight back. Maybe I can't win, but I can make them afraid. I can make this expensive. I can make them pay attention. Then let's make them pay. Over the next week, Diane filed an amended complaint that transformed Maya's case from a civil rights lawsuit into something far more serious. The new filing named the city, the police department, Officer Hampton, two supervising officers who'd signed off on his patrol reports, Gerald Foster from Risk Management, and the deputy mayor's office for maintaining the secret settlement fund. The document was over 60 pages long. It detailed patterns of misconduct, documented settlements, included sworn statements from other victims, and presented the text message records showing coordination between Hampton and Foster. It demanded full disclosure of all settlements paid from the Risk Fund, all complaints filed against Hampton and his supervising officers, and complete body cam footage archives. Within 24 hours, everything changed. A local news investigative reporter obtained a copy of the amended lawsuit and published a detailed article titled, "Secret Fund Paid Millions to Silence Police Misconduct Complaints." The story exploded. Within hours, it was picked up by regional and then national media. Community activists organized protests outside City Hall. Civil rights organizations issued statements demanding federal investigation. The mayor held an emergency press conference promising full transparency and an immediate internal review. The police chief announced Officer Hampton had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The deputy mayor's office released a carefully worded statement claiming the Risk Management Fund was standard liability protection and not an attempt to conceal wrongdoing. But it was too late. The narrative had shifted. What had been one pharmacist fighting one officer was now a citywide scandal about systemic corruption. Maya watched it all unfold from her pharmacy, still filling prescriptions, still helping patients, still living her life even as the world around her seemed to catch fire. Reporters camped outside her business. Camera Cruz requested interviews. She declined most, releasing statements through Diane instead. But the pressure didn't stop. It escalated in different ways. Someone filed a complaint with the state pharmacy board claiming Maya had dispensed medication without proper authorization. It was false, easily disproven, but it required responding to formal charges and attending a hearing. Her business insurance carrier sent a notice that her premiums were being reviewed due to increased liability exposure. Her bank called again about unusual account activity. One evening, after a particularly long day, Maya found an envelope tucked under her pharmacy's door. Inside was a single piece of paper with a printed message. "You have no idea how expensive this is going to get." She photographed it, sent it to Diane, and added it to the growing file of evidence. Then she locked up her pharmacy and drove home, exhausted but unbroken. That night, she opened her laptop and searched for something specific. It took her nearly 2 hours of digging through archived records, cross-referencing names, and following paper trails. But finally, she found it. Gerald Foster, the risk management analyst who'd been coordinating with Officer Hampton, had previously worked for a private consulting firm that specialized in municipal liability reduction strategies. That firm had contracts with 3 other cities, all of which had recently faced federal civil rights investigations. Foster had been hired by her city 3 months before the first documented settlement from the secret fund. She emailed her findings to Diane with a subject line. This was designed, not accidental. Diane called her immediately. Maya, where did you find this? Public employment records, cross-referenced with corporate filings and news archives. Foster wasn't hired randomly. Someone brought him in specifically to set up this system. Who hired him? That's what we need to find out. But the approval would have come from city leadership, either the mayor's office or the city manager. This just got much bigger. I know. Maya, are you okay? Honestly, Maya looked around her apartment, at the case files spread across her coffee table, at the broken window repair receipt, at the stack of threatening messages and harassing documentation. No, I am exhausted. I am scared. I am angry. But I'm not stopping. Good. Because tomorrow we're going to file a motion to compel the city to reveal who authorized Foster's hiring and who approved the creation of the Risk Management Fund. We're going to pull every thread until this whole thing unravels. What they fight us on everything. Then we fight back harder. Maya, you were right about something. This case stopped being about you the moment we found that fund. This is about everyone they've silenced, everyone they've paid off, everyone who was too scared or too poor to fight back. You're fighting for all of them now. After the call ended, Maya sat in the darkness of her apartment and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd started. She'd wanted justice for one humiliating incident. Instead, she'd uncovered institutional corruption that had been operating for years. The system that had tried to quietly push her aside had inadvertently revealed itself. Now, there was no going back. For either of them. Across the city, in a small apartment paid for by a police salary, Officer Derek Hampton sat alone with a bottle of whiskey and his phone. His lawyer had called earlier with bad news. The department was distancing itself. The union was reconsidering its support. His name was all over the news, attached to words like misconduct and corruption and civil rights violations. He'd followed procedure. He'd done what he was trained to do. He'd operated within a culture that had always protected its own. And now that culture was stepping back, leaving him exposed. He pulled up Maya Richardson's pharmacy website on his phone, stared at her professional photo, read the reviews praising her kindness and expertise. She looked so ordinary, so non-threatening. How had one woman caused all of this? He didn't understand that he hadn't been fighting one woman. He'd been fighting the accumulated weight of every person the system had wronged, channeled through someone who understood how power worked and refused to be crushed by it. The trap he'd helped set had closed, but he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. The secret settlement fund's exposure transformed Maya's case from a local controversy into something far more serious. Within 72 hours of the media coverage, unmarked federal vehicles began appearing in the city. No press releases, no official announcements, just quiet meetings behind closed doors and serious men and women in dark suits carrying briefcases into City Hall. Federal civil rights investigators had arrived, and the city government knew exactly what that meant. Maya noticed the change immediately. The harassment that had been constant suddenly stopped. No surprise inspections. No delayed shipments. No mysterious banking issues. Her phone, which had been ringing constantly with both support and threats, went strangely quiet on the threat side. It was the silence of an animal realizing it was being watched by a larger predator. They're scared, Diane explained during a meeting at her office. Federal oversight means potential criminal charges, not just civil liability. The Department of Justice doesn't play games. If they find evidence of systematic civil rights violations, people go to prison. So what happens now? We wait. We cooperate fully with federal investigators. And we keep building our case because federal investigations move slowly and we need to maintain pressure. That pressure came from unexpected sources. A junior analyst named Timothy Ross from the city's risk management department contacted Diane through an intermediary, requesting a confidential meeting. He was young, maybe 26, with nervous hands and eyes that kept darting to the windows of the coffee shop where they met. "I've been working in risk management for 2 years," Timothy said quietly, his coffee untouched. "When I started, I thought I'd be helping the city manage legitimate liability issues. Insurance claims, worker compensation, normal stuff. But about 6 months in, I noticed certain payments that didn't make sense." "What kind of payments?" Maya asked. "Settlements categorized under infrastructure loss or equipment damage, but the amounts were wrong. Too high for broken streetlights or damaged vehicles. And they always involved Gerald Foster signing off personally. When I asked about it, he told me it was above my clearance level." Diane leaned forward. "Did you keep records?" Timothy's hands shook as he reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a flash drive. Spreadsheets, payment authorizations, email chains. I copied everything before they could delete it. After the lawsuit became public, Foster started wiping files. I watched him do it. He thought nobody was paying attention, but I was. "Why are you doing this?" Maya asked. Timothy looked at her directly for the first time. "Because my younger brother is black. He's 16. Every time he leaves the house, my mom worries about police stops. She makes him practice how to keep his hands visible, how to speak respectfully even when he's being disrespected. I've watched that fear my whole life. Then I find out I've been working for people who pay to cover up exactly what she's afraid of." He shook his head. "I can't be part of that." Diane took the flash drive. "This is incredibly brave. You know they'll figure out it was you eventually." "I know. I already have a job lined up in another city. I'm leaving next month. But I needed to do this first." The information on Timothy's flash drive was devastating. It contained detailed records of 18 settlements over 5 years, complete with victim names, incident descriptions, and payment amounts. Most settlements range from $50,000 to $200,000. All included ironclad NDAs. All involved allegations against police officers. And most critically, all required approval signatures from Gerald Foster and someone in the deputy mayor's office. "This proves coordination at the highest levels," Diane said, reviewing the files with Maya. "Foster couldn't authorize payments this size alone. Someone above him knew and approved." "Who signed off?" Diane pointed to a digital signature on multiple documents. "Deputy Mayor Patricia Vance. She's been in that position for 7 years. Every major settlement from this fund has her approval." The amended lawsuit expanded again. Patricia Vance was added as a defendant. The complaint now alleged a conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights, institutional fraud, and racketeering under federal RICO statutes. This wasn't just about one pharmacist anymore. It was about a systematic operation to conceal misconduct and silence victims. Meanwhile, Officer Derek Hampton's world was collapsing. Placed on administrative leave, he spent his days at home, watching news coverage that grew increasingly damning. His fellow officers stopped returning his calls. His union representative informed him they were limiting their defense coverage due to the expanding scope of the case. His wife asked him to sleep in the guest room. One afternoon, desperate and alone, Hampton did something foolish. He drove to Diane Crawford's office and asked to speak with her privately. When she agreed to meet him, he sat across from her in a conference room and tried to explain himself. "I followed procedure," he said, his voice carrying a defensive edge. "Everything I did was within department policy. We were trained to be assertive, to establish control, to treat certain situations with increased caution." "Certain situations meaning certain neighborhoods? Certain people?" Diane asked calmly. "High crime areas. Places where officer safety is a concern." Dr. Richardson was picking up medical supplies in broad daylight on a commercial street. What exactly made that a high-risk situation? Hampton shifted uncomfortably. She was out of place for the area. Out of place. Can you elaborate? She didn't look like she belonged there. Because she's black? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Officer Hampton, why are you here? He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "I need protection. A deal. I can provide context about how things really work, about the culture, about what we're told to do versus what's written in the manual. You're offering to testify against your supervisors? If it helps my situation, yes. Diane studied him carefully. Let me be very clear. I represent Dr. Richardson and other victims of this system. I don't represent you. If you want to cooperate, you'll need your own attorney to negotiate with prosecutors. But I will say this. Your testimony could be valuable. Not because it excuses what you did, but because it demonstrates that this corruption goes beyond individual officers. Will it help me avoid criminal charges? That's not up to me. But Officer Hampton, you need to understand something. You weren't just following orders. You made choices. You humiliated Dr. Richardson because you could. You targeted her because you assumed she'd be powerless. You were wrong about that, and now you're facing consequences. If you want any hope of redemption, you need to stop defending your actions and start taking responsibility for them. After Hampton left, Diane called Maya. He's trying to cut a deal. He wants to blame department culture and his supervisors. Will he testify? Maybe. He's scared enough. But Maya, I need to ask you something. If he cooperates, if his testimony helps expose the larger conspiracy, how will you feel about him potentially receiving reduced charges? Maya was quiet for a long moment. I don't want him to escape accountability. But if his testimony helps prevent this from happening to others, if it helps dismantle this system, then justice isn't about punishing one man. It's about changing the system that created him. That's a remarkably mature perspective. I'm tired of being angry, Ms. Crawford. I want this to mean something. The media battlefield intensified as the case expanded. Every local news outlet covered it. National networks sent reporters. Legal analysts debated the implications on cable news. The city became a symbol of everything wrong with police accountability, and everyone wanted a piece of the story. Officer Hampton, against the advice of whatever legal counsel he still had, agreed to a televised interview with a local news anchor. He wore civilian clothes and sat in his living room, trying to appear sympathetic and misunderstood. The interview was a disaster. I want people to understand that officers face split-second decisions in dangerous situations, Hampton said, his voice carefully measured. Dr. Richardson was picking up medical supplies in the middle of the day, the anchor responded. What was dangerous about that situation? You never know. We're trained to be cautious, to assess threats. What threat did she pose? It's about patterns, recognizing situations that could escalate. Can you explain what pattern you recognized? Hampton hesitated, realizing the trap. Just experience. Professional judgment. Your body cam footage shows you mispronouncing her name, forcing her to empty her bag in public, and asking if she had papers. Those don't sound like professional judgments. They sound like harassment. That's taken out of context. We've seen the full footage. What context are we missing? Hampton's composure cracked. Look, we deal with these situations every day. We're told to establish control, to be assertive in our patrol areas. Sometimes that means being firm with people who might not understand their place in. He stopped himself, but it was too late. The phrase hung in the air. Their place in what? Officer Hampton? I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I'm saying that there are procedures, protocols. We follow training. If people have issues with how policing works, they should take it up with the department, not individual officers. The anchor leaned forward. The lawsuit alleges the department has been systematically covering up complaints and paying victims to stay silent. Are you saying you were following protocols that included harassment and cover-ups? I'm saying I did my job as trained. If my supervisors approved my actions, if my reports were signed off on, then how am I the only one being blamed? It was a catastrophic mistake. Hampton had just admitted on camera that his supervisors knew about and approved his conduct. Within hours, clips of the interview spread across social media. Legal experts dissected his words. Civil rights advocates called for criminal charges. And most importantly, his statement contradicted carefully crafted denials from his supervising officers. One of those supervisors, Sergeant Michael Brennan, had previously testified in a deposition that he'd been unaware of any issues with Hampton's conduct. Now, Hampton's own words suggested Brennan not only knew but approved. The contradiction was damning. Diane filed an emergency motion to compel Brennan's complete patrol supervision records. 2 days later, a judge granted it. The records revealed Brennan had reviewed and signed off on dozens of Hampton stop reports, including several that mentioned prolonged detentions for verification and assertive public engagement. The language was coded, but the meaning was clear. Brennan knew exactly what Hampton was doing. When Brennan was deposed again, this time he arrived with his own attorney and invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination on nearly every substantive question. The invocations created a damning silence. Innocent people don't refuse to answer questions about their supervisory duties. The second supervising officer, Lieutenant Sharon Mills, took a different approach. She hired a prominent defense attorney and released a statement claiming she'd repeatedly raised concerns about Hampton's conduct internally, but had been overruled by department leadership. She provided emails showing she'd questioned certain stop reports and had been told by a captain to stop micromanaging patrol officers. "She's trying to flip," Diane explained to Maya. "She's positioning herself as someone who tried to stop this but was blocked by the system." Is it true? Partially. The emails are real, but she still signed off on those reports. She still participated in the system. She's just smart enough to see which way this is heading and trying to save herself. The fractures within the police department became visible. Officers who'd once stood together now pointed fingers at each other. The union issued contradictory statements. Anonymous leaks to the press revealed internal fights about who knew what and when. The solidarity that had protected Hampton and others like him was crumbling under the weight of potential criminal charges. Federal investigators interviewed dozens of current and former officers. They reviewed years of complaint records. They examined the secret settlement fund in detail. And they quietly approached several of the silenced victims, offering them immunity from their NDAs in exchange for testimony. Nicole Thompson, Marcus's sister who'd fled to Ohio, was one of them. She flew back to the city and sat with federal investigators for 6 hours, describing her own stop, her disappeared complaint, and the systematic harassment that followed. When she finished, the lead investigator told her something that made her cry. "You weren't crazy. You weren't imagining it. And it wasn't your fault." The tide was turning, but the city fought back hard. The mayor's office released a statement claiming the settlement fund was a standard risk management tool used by municipalities nationwide. They hired an expensive public relations firm to flood local media with stories about police officers doing good work in the community. They organized press conferences where supportive citizens praised law enforcement. Deputy Mayor Patricia Vance gave her own interview, presenting herself as a dedicated public servant who'd been misled by staff members like Gerald Foster. She claimed she'd signed settlement documents without fully understanding their implications, trusting her subordinates to handle details appropriately. "She's lying," Timothy Ross told Diane when he saw the interview. "I have emails where she specifically asks about concealing settlement terms and minimizing public disclosure. She knew exactly what she was signing." Those emails became exhibits in the lawsuit. When Vance was deposed, her attorney objected to nearly every question, but the emails spoke for themselves. One particularly damaging message showed her writing to Foster, "We need to ensure these matters stay sealed. The last thing we need is a pattern becoming visible. A pattern becoming visible." Those words became the title of Diane's closing argument in the preliminary hearings. She stood before the judge and methodically demonstrated not just that individual officers had committed misconduct, but that city leadership had deliberately created a system to conceal it. This wasn't incompetence, Diane argued. This wasn't bureaucratic oversight. This was intentional. They built a fund. They hired a specialist. They created procedures to make complaints disappear. They paid millions to keep victims silent. And when Dr. Richardson refused to be silent, they deployed that same system against her. The harassment, the inspections, the pressure, all of it designed to make her go away quietly, just like everyone before her. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Santos, listened carefully. When Diane finished, Judge Santos addressed the city's attorneys directly. "I've reviewed the evidence presented, the phone records, the settlement fund documents, the testimony, and I'm deeply troubled by what I see. This court will not dismiss this case. Discovery will proceed in full, and I'm ordering the city to produce complete records of all settlements paid from this fund, all complaints filed against Officer Hampton and his supervisors, and all communications between risk management and the police department for the past 7 years. It was a significant victory. The city's attempts to seal or limit the evidence had failed. Everything would now be exposed to scrutiny. That evening, Maya sat in her pharmacy after closing and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The fight was far from over. The trial itself would be grueling. But for the first time since that humiliating afternoon on Oakwood Avenue, she felt like the system was actually being held accountable. Her phone rang. It was Diane. Turn on Channel 7 News. Right now, Maya found a television in her back office and switched it on. The lead story showed federal agents executing a search warrant at City Hall. They were removing boxes of documents from the risk management department. The scroll at the bottom of the screen read, "Federal investigation expands. Criminal charges possible." "They're going after criminal charges," Diane said over the phone. "Not just civil liability. Criminal conspiracy. Civil rights violations under color of law." "This is huge, Maya." Maya watched as Gerald Foster was led out of the building by federal agents. He looked smaller than she'd imagined, just a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, his face pale and frightened. Deputy Mayor Vance appeared on screen moments later, surrounded by attorneys, refusing to answer reporters' questions. "What does this mean for our case?" Maya asked. "It means we won. Not the trial yet, but the war for credibility. The city can't claim this was all exaggerated or overblown when federal agents are carting away evidence. Every victim who was paid to stay silent, every complaint that disappeared, every person who was told they were imagining things, they're all being vindicated right now." After the call ended, Maya sat alone in her office, watching the news coverage. They showed her pharmacy on screen, described her as the pharmacist whose refusal to stay silent exposed systematic corruption. They interviewed people on the street, and most expressed outrage at what had been hidden. They showed Officer Hampton's house, though he wasn't visible. Then they showed something else, a press conference organized by community activists. At least a dozen people stood together, holding signs reading, "We were silenced too," and "No more secret settlements." Nicole Thompson stood among them, no longer hiding. Marcus stood beside his sister, others Maya had never met, but whose stories paralleled her own. One by one, they shared brief accounts of their experiences. Traffic stops that felt wrong, complaints that vanished, pressure to stay quiet, the systematic erasure of their dignity and their truth. And they all thanked Dr. Maya Richardson for having the courage to fight when they couldn't. Maya felt tears sliding down her face. She hadn't realized how isolated she'd felt throughout this ordeal until she saw those faces, heard those voices, understood that she hadn't been fighting alone. She'd been fighting for all of them. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father, who'd been following every development despite her asking him not to worry. "You did what I couldn't. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Maya closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Not victory, not yet, but vindication, recognition. The knowledge that standing up had mattered, that refusing to accept humiliation had created ripples far beyond her own experience. The system had tried to crush her. Instead, she'd helped expose it, and the exposure was only beginning. The federal search warrants and criminal investigation shifted the landscape entirely, but Maya's civil lawsuit still had to proceed. The trial that city officials had hoped would never happen was now scheduled, and the courtroom where it would unfold became the center of a national conversation about police accountability and institutional corruption. Judge Margaret Santos presided over a courtroom packed beyond capacity. Journalists filled the designated press section, their laptops ready. Civil rights organizations sent observers. Law students from 3 universities secured seats to witness what their professors called a landmark case. Local residents lined up hours before proceedings began, hoping for one of the limited public seats. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a reckoning. Maya sat at the plaintiff's table beside Diane Crawford, wearing a simple navy dress and her pharmacist's coat, draped over the back of her chair. She'd brought it intentionally, a reminder to herself and everyone watching who she was and what she'd been doing when this began. Not an activist, not a troublemaker, a healthcare professional trying to help her community. The defense table held 5 attorneys representing various defendants. Officer Derek Hampton sat at the far end, separate from the city's representatives. His union had limited their support to providing basic counsel. He looked diminished in his civilian suit, nothing like the imposing figure who'd forced her against her car that afternoon. Deputy Mayor Patricia Vance sat with her own legal team, also separated from the main defense. Gerald Foster had already accepted a plea deal with federal prosecutors in exchange for testimony. Sergeant Brennan remained under criminal investigation and wasn't present. Lieutenant Mills had been granted limited immunity for her cooperation. Judge Santos called the court to order, and the trial began. Diane's opening statement was precise and devastating. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke loudly enough. "This case is about power," Diane said, walking slowly in front of the jury. "The power to stop someone without cause. The power to humiliate them publicly. The power to make complaints disappear. The power to pay victims into silence. And most importantly, the power to believe you'll never face consequences for any of it." She detailed Maya's stop, the systematic harassment that followed, and the discovery of the secret settlement fund. She explained how the system worked. Officers like Hampton targeting vulnerable citizens, supervisors approving their reports, risk management concealing complaints, and city leadership funding it all. Dr. Richardson wasn't supposed to fight back, Diane continued. She was supposed to be grateful they let her go, supposed to accept the humiliation, supposed to stay quiet like the 17 others they paid off. But she didn't, and because she refused to be silenced, we discovered something this city hoped would stay buried forever. The defense attorneys responded with different strategies. Hampton's lawyer argued he'd followed training and departmental culture. The city's attorneys claimed the settlement fund was legitimate risk management. Vance's team insisted she'd been misled by subordinates. None of their arguments addressed the core truth. The system had been designed to avoid accountability. Maya was called to testify on the second day. She walked to the witness stand with the same calm demeanor she brought to her pharmacy every morning. Diane guided her through the events methodically. "Dr. Richardson, can you describe what you were doing on the afternoon of the incident?" "I was picking up medical supplies for my pharmacy. One of my regular patients needed insulin, and I was running low on supplies." "What happened when you returned to your car?" Maya took a breath and began recounting the stop. She described Officer Hampton's approach, his questions, his tone. She described being forced to place her hands on her car in front of dozens of strangers. She described her belongings scattered across the hood like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed. "He asked if I had papers," Maya said quietly. "He asked about my citizenship. I'm a United States citizen. I've never lived anywhere else." But in that moment, standing on a public street with people staring, I felt like I didn't belong in my own country. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors leaned forward. "How did that make you feel?" "Humiliated, angry, powerless. I spent 8 years building my pharmacy, earning trust in my community, proving my expertise. And in 30 minutes, one officer made me feel like none of that mattered. Like I was guilty of existing in the wrong place." Hampton's attorney cross-examined her aggressively, trying to suggest she'd been uncooperative or defensive. Maya remained calm, answering each question with the same measured precision she used when counseling patients about medications. "Isn't it true you questioned the officer's authority?" "I asked why I was being detained." "That's not questioning authority. That's exercising my rights." "You refused to comply immediately with his instructions." "I complied with every lawful instruction. I showed identification. I answered questions. I placed my hands on the vehicle when ordered. What I didn't do was accept humiliation silently." The attorney tried several more approaches, but Maya didn't break. She'd spent months preparing for this moment, and her legal background served her well. She understood the game being played and refused to be rattled. When the full body cam footage was played for the jury, the courtroom went silent again. Unlike the edited clip that had circulated online, This version showed everything. Hampton's initial approach without cause, his escalating tone, his deliberate delays, his mocking pronunciation of her name, his question about papers. The entire 30-minute humiliation played out in high definition. Several jurors visibly reacted. One woman shook her head. A man in the back row crossed his arms tightly. When Hampton told Maya she should be grateful he was letting her go, a juror whispered something to the person beside them. The pattern witnesses came next. Nicole Thompson testified about her disappeared complaint and the harassment that followed. A man named David Harris described a stop eerily similar to Maya's, complete with a lengthy detention and scattered belongings. A college student named Jasmine Porter recounted being stopped while walking home from class, questioned aggressively, and told she didn't belong in this neighborhood. Each testimony reinforced the same truth. This wasn't one bad interaction. It was systematic. The forensic accountants took the stand and methodically explained the secret settlement fund. They showed payment records, authorization signatures, and the deliberate miscategorization of settlements as infrastructure costs. They demonstrated how the fund had been designed specifically to avoid oversight and public disclosure. In your professional opinion, Diane asked, was this fund operating in accordance with standard municipal risk management practices? No, the accountant replied firmly. Standard practice involves transparent reporting, oversight board review, and public disclosure of settlement terms within legal bounds. This fund was specifically structured to avoid all of those safeguards. It was designed to conceal, not manage, liability. Gerald Foster testified under his immunity agreement. He looked smaller than he had in the news footage, his voice barely above a whisper as he described how he'd been hired specifically to create a system for burying complaints. He admitted coordinating with Hampton and other officers. He admitted misleading oversight boards. He admitted that Deputy Mayor Vance had not only known about the fund's true purpose, but had explicitly instructed him to minimize public exposure. She told you to conceal the settlements? Diane asked. Yes. She said the city couldn't afford the negative publicity or the flood of lawsuits that might follow if people knew how many complaints we were settling. Vance's attorney objected strenuously, but the damage was done. When Vance herself took the stand the next day, her denials rang hollow against Foster's detailed testimony and her own emails. Diane's cross-examination was surgical. Deputy Mayor Vance, you signed authorization for 18 settlements totaling over $2 million, correct? I signed many documents. I trust my staff, too. That's not what I asked. Did you sign these authorizations? Diane placed copies in front of her. Yes, but... And this email, sent from your account, states we need to ensure these matters stay sealed, and the last thing we need is a pattern becoming visible. Did you write that? Vance's attorney objected, but Judge Santos overruled. Vance stared at the email, then quietly said, yes. So you knew these settlements were problematic. You knew there was a pattern, and you intentionally tried to keep it hidden from the public. It was about protecting the city from frivolous lawsuits. 17 people, Deputy Mayor. 17 people who were humiliated, harassed, and then paid to stay quiet. Were all of those frivolous? Vance had no good answer. Officer Hampton's testimony was perhaps the most revealing. His attorney had advised him to express remorse, to acknowledge mistakes, to appear sympathetic. But Hampton couldn't help himself. Under cross-examination, his defensive arrogance emerged. I was doing my job, he insisted. I was trained to establish control in potentially dangerous situations. What was dangerous about Dr. Richardson picking up medical supplies? Diane asked. You can't always tell. We're taught to be cautious. Cautious of what specifically? Of situations that could escalate. How is a pharmacist picking up supplies likely to escalate? Hampton hesitated, then said something that would echo through the rest of the trial. She was in an area where we'd had complaints. Certain types of people tend to raise concerns. Certain types of people. Can you elaborate? I mean suspicious activity. People who don't fit the neighborhood profile. And Dr. Richardson didn't fit the neighborhood profile because Hampton realized the trap too late. I didn't say that. You said she was out of place. that she didn't fit the profile. What profile were you using to make that assessment? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The jury saw exactly what he meant. The closing arguments stretched over an entire day. The defense attorneys argued training failures, systemic problems beyond individual control, and legitimate risk management needs. But their arguments felt thin against the weight of evidence. Diane's closing was powerful in its simplicity. Members of the jury, this case asks you to answer one question. Do we live in a society where power must answer for its abuses, or one where the powerful simply pay to avoid accountability? Dr. Richardson was humiliated for doing nothing wrong. When she complained, the system tried to crush her. When she refused to be crushed, they tried to pay her off. When she refused the money, they exposed something they never wanted you to see. A system designed to let officers like Derek Hampton act without consequence. A system that spent millions to keep victims silent. A system that only stopped because one woman refused to accept that this is just how things are. She paused, letting her words settle. Your verdict will answer a question beyond this courtroom. It will answer whether we truly believe in equal justice, or whether we just say we do when it's convenient. Dr. Richardson believed it. She believed it enough to risk everything. Now the question is, do you? The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. Maya spent that time in her pharmacy, trying to maintain normalcy even as her future hung in balance. She filled prescriptions, counseled patients, smiled at children. But her mind was in that jury room, wondering if 12 strangers would see what she saw or dismiss it as complications of an imperfect system. When the call came that the jury had reached a verdict, Maya felt her hands begin to shake. Diane met her outside the courtroom. Whatever happens, Diane said, you've already won something important. You exposed them. You fought back. That matters. But will it be enough? We're about to find out. The courtroom filled quickly. News cameras positioned themselves. Maya took her seat, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. Officer Hampton looked pale and diminished. Deputy Mayor Vance sat rigid, her face carefully blank. Judge Santos called for the verdict. The jury foreman, a middle-aged black man who'd been attentive throughout the trial, stood with the verdict form. In the matter of Richardson versus Hampton, on the charge of civil rights violations under color of law, we find the defendant liable. Maya felt Diane's hand squeeze hers. In the matter of Richardson versus the city, on charges of systematic civil rights violations and institutional negligence, we find the defendant liable. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. In the matter of Richardson versus Vance, on charges of conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights and institutional fraud, we find the defendant liable. The foreman continued through each count. Liable, liable, liable. The jury had accepted everything. Every argument, every piece of evidence, every pattern witness. They'd seen exactly what Diane had shown them. Then came the damages. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $1,200,000. Maya's breath caught. We award punitive damages in the amount of $7,800,000. The courtroom erupted. Judge Santos gavelled for order, but the noise continued. $9 million. The jury had sent an unmistakable message. This behavior had a cost. But there was more. The jury also recommended structural remedies, federal oversight of the police department, mandatory reporting of all settlements, civilian review board authority, and termination of any officer with a pattern of civil rights complaints. Maya sat stunned, trying to process what had just happened. 9 years of medical school, 8 years of building her pharmacy, and 1 afternoon of humiliation had led to this moment. Not just justice for herself, but a complete dismantling of the system that had tried to silence her. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Within 48 hours, credit rating agencies downgraded the city's financial outlook. The $9 million judgment, combined with ongoing federal investigations and the reopening of previous sealed settlements, created massive liability exposure. Insurance carriers balked at coverage. Bond investors demanded higher interest rates. The police chief announced his resignation that evening. 2 city council members followed the next day. Deputy Mayor Patricia Vance, facing both the civil judgment and pending federal criminal charges, resigned within a week. She would later plead guilty to conspiracy charges and serve 18 months in federal prison. Officer Derek Hampton was terminated immediately. His peace officer certification was permanently revoked. Federal prosecutors charged him with civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. He eventually pleaded guilty and served 3 years in federal prison. The secret settlement fund was dissolved and replaced with a public transparency system. Every settlement over $10,000 now required city council approval and public disclosure. A new civilian oversight board was created with actual investigative authority and subpoena power. Most significantly, the 6 previous victims whose cases had been sealed began coming forward. Their settlements were nullified based on fraud and concealment. New lawsuits were filed. The city ultimately paid over $30 million in total judgments and settlements related to the systematic misconduct. Maya returned to her pharmacy the day after the verdict. The glass had been repaired long ago. The shelves were still perfectly organized. Mrs. Lawson arrived at 7:15 sharp, as always. "I knew you'd win," the elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. "I knew it because you're exactly who I thought you were. Someone who doesn't back down from what's right." The day unfolded normally. Prescriptions filled. Patients counseled. Children asked about vitamins. But Maya felt different. Lighter. Like a weight she'd been carrying for months had finally been lifted. Civil rights organizations invited her to speak at conferences. Universities asked her to lecture. News outlets requested interviews. She declined most of them, accepting only one invitation: to speak at a community legal health initiative that provided free services to underserved neighborhoods. "I'm not an activist," she told the audience. "I'm a pharmacist. I own a small business. I help people manage their medications. But I learned something during this fight. Staying in your lane doesn't protect you if the system decides you're a problem. Sometimes you have to fight back, even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying, because the alternative is accepting that you don't deserve dignity." Her father attended that speech. Afterward, they stood together in the empty auditorium, and he hugged her tightly. "I told you to let it go when they came after me," he said quietly. "I told you to focus on your own life. I was wrong. You were scared. You wanted to protect me. But you did what I couldn't. You stood up, and you changed things." Months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Maya was opening her pharmacy when she noticed someone standing on the corner across the street. Her heart jumped before she recognized him. Officer Derek Hampton, but not in uniform. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, looking thin and tired. He'd been released pending sentencing. Their eyes met across the distance. Maya expected to feel fear or anger. Instead, she felt nothing but a strange, detached observation. He looked smaller, less significant. The man who'd once had the power to humiliate her now looked lost and uncertain. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there for a moment, then walked away, heading down the street with his hands in his pockets. Maya watched him disappear around the corner, then turned back to her pharmacy. She unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and began her morning routine. The computer system booted up. Temperature logs were checked. Prescription queues reviewed. Everything exactly as it should be. Above the door, beside her pharmacy license and business permits, hung a new plaque. It was simple, understated, but meaningful. It read, "Community Health Advocate Licensed Pharmacist. Citizen." Maya touched it briefly, then walked behind her counter. At 7:15, Mrs. Lawson arrived right on schedule. At 7:30, a young mother brought her sick child seeking advice. At 8, the morning rush began. Life continued. Prescriptions filled. Patients helped. Communities served. But something fundamental had changed. Not just in Maya's life, but in the city itself. The system that had operated in shadows had been dragged into light. The powerful who'd acted without consequence had learned they weren't untouchable. And people who'd been silent began speaking up. Maya flipped the sign on her door from closed to open. The word faced outward, visible to anyone passing by. Simple, clear, unambiguous, open. And it was. When the system is designed to silence you, and fighting back means risking everything you've built, Would you have the courage to stand up anyway? If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice and resilience.